Welcome to the LinkedIn Famous Podcast, the show where we get real about what it takes to build a personal brand on LinkedIn that gets real business results. We're talking about driving revenue from a personal LinkedIn profile by sharing real and authentic stories and points of view. I'm Brad Zomick, your host and the founder of Spectrumer, a personal brand consultancy that helps founders and executives get LinkedIn famous. Join me for unfiltered conversations from the trenches of LinkedIn. We'll meet CEOs, go-to-market executives, subject matter experts, and company employees with blockbuster LinkedIn results. We'll unpack strategy and leave you with tactical advice to grow your personal brand and demand for your company's products and services. All right, LinkedIn hustlers, it's time to level up. Welcome, LinkedIn makers and movers. Today we have a guest who was IRL, in real life famous, before she was LinkedIn famous. You may know her as the co-founder of Outlever, a marketing software that helps brands become the number one news source in their industry. But she had modest beginnings, starting out as an intern and one of the first 10 employees at BuzzFeed. And in those first few years, she rocketed into leadership position. She was the global vice president of creative. She led a team of 150 people to produce over 3,000 branded content campaigns, generating billions in views and over 100 million in revenue. Despite BuzzFeed being her first job out of college, we talk about her being in real life famous. While she was there, just at 25, she was on the Forbes 30 Under 30. And not only that, she was also on Ad Age's 40 Under 40. And this is all before we started using LinkedIn the way we do today. From there, she moved on to Cheddar, where she held the role of Chief Revenue Officer. She played a pivotal role building this live video media company from the ground up, built a couple of content studios, expanded programming from 1 to 24 hours a day, and helped grow revenue to 50 million in 3 years. And then she switched gears from media into tech and went to ClickUp, where a lot of us might know her from, where she was a Chief Creative Officer. And she contributed to the company's rapid growth, did a Super Bowl commercial, and helped grow the revenue from 2 to 200 million in 4 years. And I think it's worth noting that ClickUp was a later entrant into the project management category 10 years after the founding of Asana. So I mean, those are shark-infested waters. As if that wasn't enough, she also advises startups, including the trendy marketing software Audience Plus. And over the years, she's become LinkedIn famous. She has 30,000 followers, very active, talking about sales, marketing, and creative. And most importantly, she's building her latest venture, Outlever, on the back of her LinkedIn presence. Let's welcome Melissa Rosenthal to the podcast.
Wow, that was quite an intro. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So I like to ask every guest, tell us something that we couldn't learn about you from your LinkedIn presence.
I guess I'm very into cooking. I have a food Instagram that has 55,000 followers. I've been doing it for 13 years, and I'm really passionate about just culinary in general. I feel like it's a good creative outlet, allows me to, it's cathartic for me when I'm not working. And yeah, I'm super passionate about that. I'm also very passionate about Japan and Japanese culture.
I'll have to check out that Instagram. Instagram famous also. Along the line, at what point did you start engaging with LinkedIn? What were your motivations to invest there?
Yeah, I think very early on when things started going well at BuzzFeed, I realized that I was building my own personal brand as a byproduct of the work that I was doing at the company. And I liked being viewed as a thought leader in my peer set. LinkedIn was a good network to be able to do that. So I actually started posting articles once a week, just on the trends, the things I was seeing. I would write like long pieces. When I went to Japan, I wrote like a long piece about what we can apply to everyday business from their principles and what they follow. And I just like the reception. I feel like I was writing things that people found valuable. And I said, okay, this is a good use of my time. I'm not going to write a book, but maybe if I were to write a book someday, I could use all of the writings that I did on LinkedIn as a culmination of my thoughts over the past years. And one thing I wish that I journaled, but really LinkedIn is a journal of my entire career path. I've been writing since I was at BuzzFeed. Yeah, I stuck with it. I committed to it. I liked the feedback that I was getting. And I liked the idea of building something that I could take with me no matter where I went.
That's very interesting. LinkedIn's like having a gold rush moment, if you will. And for those who are starting, it's hard, right? They're out there posting into the ether. And for you, it's just a place to bottle your thoughts and share with the world. Probably at that point, people weren't trying to game the system like they were today. It's a very different place.
Yeah, it's a little saturated with the same stuff over and over. Where back then, I think it was people just sharing learnings. It was much more like pure in a sense. It wasn't really founder-led growth driven by LinkedIn. People they didn't really know what they were getting out of it. I think they were getting out great connections, maybe building real relationships, which is part of why I'm still on it. I love it. I do build real relationships there, even outside of business. And yeah, I think it's much more pure in that sense back then. And yeah, it's been a little bit gamified today, but it's still very valuable, obviously. That's why we're talking about it and why I'm still doing it every day.
So the feed as we know it today started around 2016. You mentioned you started with writing articles. At what point did you jump on to the long form bandwagon when that started happening in 2016?
Yeah, that's what I was doing. I was writing like long form articles through via their kind of article feature. I think maybe those were being shown more in the news feed. I can't remember exactly. But then I pivoted to short form post when I was like, oh, I can't write novels 5 days a week.
Yes, it was 2016 when people started taking the posts and writing longer stories in there. And do you have any weekly ritual around it?
Yeah, I think I was also inspired by Medium, where I was like, I don't love, like, LinkedIn still wasn't really promoting links out. I really didn't love the idea of like Medium. Like, I had a Medium page, it just didn't feel as like organic to me, and I didn't feel like it had that immediate reach of my peer network, which is why I chose to focus on LinkedIn instead. And like my formula back then was I was dealing with just so many things on a daily basis, and I would write them all down. And I would then curate my like biggest learning from the past week. And then I would focus on one and I would start to write that piece. And usually it would take maybe a week or two. And all of those things would happen in parallel. So by the time one was ready, I was already ruminating on what the next, series could be. And then when I got into a rhythm, I started to have pieces that were ready a couple months out. And then it was like, oh, it's a rhythmic way of thinking. It's a rhythmic way of operating. I had a full kind of structure of how I did it. And then I started to incorporate some of my more shorter form thoughts into the process too. And it's like, oh, I see how this actually can become this like scaled system for myself. And like when I made it, but in lieu of journaling, I would write my longer form thoughts down. That could be longer form pieces, more article focus. And then I'd have my short form pieces and just operated within different systems, all within Evernote. And I would go back to the notes. I'd write high level topics, and then I'd go back to them based on when I'd really felt my brain. Maybe it was funny. It's like I had the thoughts were very clear of what the headlines would be, but then the meat of what that content would often come to me like in the shower or in my sleep. And then I would wake up the next morning and really like flesh it out when I felt that passion about that piece.
I love that. Yeah. I think there is something to say about capturing ideas in the moment and having them ready and separating that brainstorming, if you will, or not combining the brainstorming with a writing session. So you show up to writing with something to be inspired by and schedule that.
Often it's a headline or a hook, as we'll go into, and I'll write a sentence or two down. And then once I have that, okay, my brain has enough juice to be able to ruminate on it when I'm like not fully aware of it.
You hit one of the LinkedIn buzzword bingos, hook. And this is something I really wanted to talk to you about, because for everyone out there who was following BuzzFeed at the height of its fame, BuzzFeed became famous off the back of Facebook virality. We all remember the BuzzFeed titles. They were listicles, 12 things about the movie Wicked. Number 6 is my favorite. So that, to me, in my memory at least, is when the concept of social hook came to the fore. I was running a content operation and it was B2C, and we would write the SEO title and we write the social title. Like,
yeah.
Did that come from BuzzFeed?
Yeah, definitely. We realized that very early on that hook and title were kind of everything. There's a domino effect of what happens after. You get people to click, you get people to share, but if you can't get them to click to begin with, you're going to have no viral coefficient. Yeah, the hook was definitely everything. So much so that we built out a pretty, for its time, robust engineering A/B testing mechanism to be able to test 5 to 10 hooks at a time. And it would feed the winner, starve, or losers on the homepage. So we come up with, for every article, we come up with 5 or 6 hooks, and you'd end up seeing maybe 1 or 2 and then only one. but we'd be writing 5 behind the scenes. And yeah, there's a lot of formulaic thought that went into it. There's the numbered list, the odd numbered list, the curiosity gap. Everything had a formula behind it or a thought process. And we would test some of the tried and true ones that had worked really well for us. And then on every post, we experimented with 2 new hooks that hadn't been done before. And that's how we built our ties way of thinking about virality and hooks and curiosity gap and what that meant for our content. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of the application that I see on LinkedIn today that came and has been remixed from the viral era of BuzzFeed, for sure.
That's just fascinating. Does that waterfall into your own system? Is that something as LinkedIn went from long form articles to short form mini articles, because they're still pretty meaty. You can do 400 words in a post. Were hooks part of your process? And as things have evolved since you first started in articles, has that changed at all?
The hook is it's still everything, right? Like it decides whether people read on or they skip ahead, and it decides whether you're put higher into the algorithm or it's over. The hook is the single most important thing. Now, what you don't want to do is bait and switch, which is you have a hook and then you don't deliver on that hook within the context and the meat of the post. So I think it always has to deliver on what the promise is of the hook. And I think you find a lot of people that don't do that, and they bait you and they hook you. And then all of a sudden it's just what was that? Which is just gamifying the system. And it's the same thing with BuzzFeed, like the post that people hated content where you would give them a hook and then the hook didn't deliver. There was a site called Upworthy. Upworthy tried to really gamify the hook in this bait and switch curiosity gap way, where they'd write these, you'll never believe what happened when the nurse jumped off of the building. It was just these really far out hooks that never delivered in content. And for a while they were crushing it because everyone was clicking on those videos, but the content never delivered. People hated it. And then Facebook penalized them pretty heavily and basically cut them out of the algorithm altogether. I think there's a happy medium between the proper hook and then the delivery of what the content is to actually deliver on that hook. And I think it needs to be done well and thoughtfully, and you either build or lose the trust of your entire audience based on that.
True. I guess that's where the term clickbait came from.
Clickbait can be great. We can deliver on the clickbait and people are happy with the outcome and they feel some sort of gratification from reading it or an emotional response. But if they don't, and they feel like they've been tricked, it hurts everything.
You started investing in LinkedIn when you were working in media. It was more of a place for you to journal. And then things changed. You eventually moved into a sales role, still within media, and then you moved into tech. So I'm curious, how did the systems you put in place to maintain your presence, also it got more and more crowded during that time, evolve over the years?
Systems didn't really evolve. I think the topics of conversation evolved just based on what was trending. You follow the trends, you try to attach yourself to some of them, but you still try to stay tried and true to who you are and build based off of what your experience is, right? I think the single most important thing that you can have is your experience and why you're writing about the topics that you're writing about. The reality is I wish that was more true sometimes. I think that's what ultimately is valuable in the end. So I'm playing the long game. I don't want to just talk about and repost Steve Jobs stories. I just don't want to do that. Everyone knows that stuff already. And I feel like there's these kind of bot machines that are out there just reposting this stuff. And maybe it works for them, great, but that's not the brand that I'm building. So I always try to stay true to my unique experience, what I can offer the community to build real, meaningful relationships. And that's why I'm there. And that's why I write there. And I'm not fully in it to go viral all the time. I do go viral and I know what I will, which is really interesting. I can make viral posts. I just don't want to do it all the time. It's just not what I'm in it for. And I think that's just the big differentiator for me. I have a really specific reason why I do it and what I want out of it. And that is not completely parallel with making things go viral all the time.
I love that authenticity. I think underneath all of this, there's a human experience. I think people do enjoy hearing real stories.
And I think that's my favorite part about LinkedIn, when I read real people's experiences, real stories. That's what motivates me. That's what gets me excited. And that's what I want to contribute back to the community. When I can do that, and when there's overlap between that and virality or that and shareability and that resonating with people, that's where I want to live on a platform.
So the system didn't change, but you moved into roles where there's a mandate to grow. And at a startup, when you moved to ClickUp, What was the calculus in terms of frequency of getting your messages out there?
ClickUp was interesting because Finn was definitely taking off. I had been writing there for years and I was like, this is so valuable. This has given me every good thing in my career, basically. LinkedIn has given me so many opportunities, every amazing conference I've spoken at, all my jobs, mostly business relationships, everything. So I was like, we have to do this. And my mandate at ClickUp to my team and to hope and to really for the whole company was how do we turn people into media channels through LinkedIn? And it was, we built systems and we built program to educate individuals at the company how they could be thought leaders within their own areas because they were all subject matter experts within product, within tech, within engineering, within product growth. And they all had some really great things to offer. And at the end of the day, it benefits the entire company. For me, like it was the same kind of evolution of my strategy, just speaking more to being in B2B tech and being in a hyper growth SaaS company. And for the rest of the company, I created this program where I helped them turn into thought leaders and influencers themselves. We gave them media training. We gave them video assets. I would sit with them once a week and give them 20 questions that we would cut into short form video assets. We definitely believed very heavily in LinkedIn. We believed in people as channels, which is really just like the scaled version of me doing it only by myself.
Very forward thinking. I love that mentality of thinking of people at channel and just being supportive of people sharing on LinkedIn. There's a lot of companies these days that don't necessarily approve it or help.
I think that's also changed. I think founder-led growth is the thing. And I think that people are now realizing the business value of LinkedIn in a much larger way. And it's top of mind for everyone. Everyone is thinking about how LinkedIn needs to be a part of their presence. That's where their ICP is. No matter what their ICP is, mostly their ICP is usually on LinkedIn. So I think it's now much more mainstream and everyone is just trying to figure out how they do it and how they do it well.
And actually, I would say founder-led is almost 101. Employee-led is probably 201. Or maybe 401. Yeah. I think after founder-led, there's probably evangelist, 201. Employee-led, 301. If it was courses. Let's talk about the human side of switching gears into B2B. What's going on in your world? And was there a rebuilding of your network? Because going to ClickUp, everyone knew you in the media world, but in B2B tech, no one knew you like they do today. What was going on behind the scenes? Recast that network and get to the place where you are today, where everybody sees your stuff and loves it, and almost starting over in a way.
Yeah. It was like very much starting over. It was very weird. You have this very close-knit like media network of people. Like media exists in its own like echo chamber to some extent. And everyone, it's an ego-driven environment. And you have people that like follow each other and they talk about each other and they don't really know anything that goes outside of that world. It's weird. But yeah, which was very hard when you mentioned these accolades that I'd gotten very early on. And you believe that those are going to carry with you through whatever you do. And that's just not the case. Going to be tech was like completely starting over. Now, I didn't not have my following on LinkedIn and I still was like, oh, we're going to continue doing this. But yeah, it was definitely like building for what my personal brand looked like in tech versus media, which is just very different. The things I was talking about was very different. I was a first-time marketer in B2B SaaS, and that's a completely different roadmap. And I had to build a network and a community from scratch. But I did it mostly through LinkedIn. Again, it was definitely peer network. And obviously, there are amazing people that worked at ClickUp who were very supportive and great. But LinkedIn was very important in that part of my career, for sure.
I love that. It's interesting seeing people transition and to start from scratch again, especially in doing it in an age when it's a lot harder.
Yeah. It's also, media is so about celebration of media and of people and of accolades and award shows and ceremonies. It's literally, that's what the entire industry is. And maybe not so much anymore because they're not flush with cash and things aren't going so well. But that's what the entire industry was. It was just like a constant like ego celebration of people, individuals. And B2B SaaS is much more, I wouldn't say like fully humble because definitely there's a lot to it, but it's definitely more about building. It's more about like traction. It's more about product market fit and finding real value. And it's less about like ego driven things. And I love that about it. And yeah, I think it's just a more authentic industry in a way. People are really doing the hard work and a lot of them go unrecognized and they're trying to build their own personal brands because no one's celebrating them on a daily basis. And I think it's just so much work that goes behind the scenes, like building tech companies, that there are a lot of unsung heroes and what I was trying to do is, oh, these are the untapped areas of our company. Like, how do we get them to talk about the things that they're doing? They're amazing. They're driving our entire growth engine. We should be talking about those things. But those people didn't even want to talk about themselves. There's something different from media where like all people want to do is talk about themselves. So it was just very interesting, like carrying that over and trying to translate it into the world of B2B SaaS.
Having been there myself for 12 years in-house in SaaS, I can attest to that. And I think I was often more focused with trying to get the CEO and the sales team to be on LinkedIn to sell. It
Yeah.
was only in the last year or so that I had got to the point where I had to try to sell myself. Yeah, I think it's great. Like more companies need to be doing what ClickUp is doing, specifically at ClickUp, or actually maybe a little bit about Cheddar, because I think things had started to change. But at that point, with LinkedIn being a business driver, I'm curious the role of LinkedIn. And I would say at Cheddar and probably at ClickUp, you probably had pretty good marketing attribution. Do you have a sense of the role LinkedIn played in the growth of those companies?
At Cheddar, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but we completely hacked LinkedIn to the point where we were the biggest publisher on LinkedIn by far. What we basically did was we took our CEO John's LinkedIn page and we took it over. And instead of publishing the interviews that we would do on air, we said, okay, what's like viral content that would be business focused that we could like really like game the algorithm on LinkedIn? And that was like gadget videos. So we had a ton of things that you don't see these types of views on LinkedIn anymore, but they got millions and millions of from LinkedIn. One went viral off of LinkedIn, but it was like they did surgery on a grape. And it was like this like micro surgery tool that was able to like perform surgery on like small fruit. And we were just focusing on these like really tech forward gadgets. And that was our entire strategy. And it put Cheddar on the map. Like people like knew us from these viral videos and it gave us immense brand recognition. So we can thank LinkedIn for our entire social strategy. We were getting 30 million views a month on LinkedIn alone. No one gets that.
Wow. For a personal page.
We realized we weren't getting the impressions on our company page. So we said, all right, we're just going to take over our CEO's page. His entire strategy through us was the gadget videos that crushed it.
I do remember for a while when Cheddar was popular on LinkedIn, it was trendy. Were you attributing that, like trying to measure the success of that, or is more of looked at as branding?
We did brand awareness studies and it's like, how did you hear about us? And it was through LinkedIn. And it's, oh yeah, I heard about Cheddar through LinkedIn. And then people started talking about what you guys actually did. It was a billboard strategy, really. I was curious enough to see what Cheddar did. So I went to the site and was like, oh, you guys are a news network. And I think that was a pretty forward thinking strategy. It was like, we don't need to, every platform should not be the same type of content. Our interviews that we do on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange are great for live broadcast TV, but they're not great as clips cut up on LinkedIn. If you want to watch those interviews, we have them on our site or you can watch them live. But the way of thinking about short form content as a funnel into our actual product was I think a pretty innovative way of thinking at the time, for sure.
Definitely. I would say it definitely innovative because I think what's happening right now with video is like a second coming of video. Back then, not a lot of people did it. It probably got a lot of views, but I would say now you hear all the stories about people posting video and it gets these like crazy
impression numbers. But we would get like, it was 50,000 likes and 100,000 share. Like it was
that's
just
unheard of. Yeah.
It doesn't exist anymore. But I don't think LinkedIn was like ready for what we were doing. And it was all you would see in the feed was Cheddar. It was amazing. It was like it was like they built the network just for us, or the algorithm just for us, rather. But yeah, it was like a first in its kind approach, which is very cool. So we definitely broke LinkedIn.
Did that change when you went over to ClickUp? So it's a B2B company where they have these whole marketing operations team like geared towards measuring like where the deal came from, right?
Yeah.
What did measurement and impact look like there?
We did a lot of different style videos on LinkedIn that were targeted toward the developer ICP or the product marketer or the project manager. Yeah, attribution's hard, but we definitely did a lot of brand awareness studying. How did you hear about us? Sourcing, mentions through our sales folks. It was definitely like, I believe it's multi-touch attribution. You hear about something, how many touch points until you actually close the deal. But yeah, brand awareness was a huge part of our strategy. So it tied into that pretty well.
Do you recall if they stack ranked channels or was it in the top 2 or 3?
social holistically once. I don't know if but it was I think we grouped it also with just brand awareness in general and like investing in that. I think if you get too granular on every single thing, you start to just like analysis paralysis in terms of not being able to experiment and really try things. But we definitely valued where people were coming from and how they heard about us.
That is a fair point. And I think at the end of the day, having a strong brand is where the demand comes from. So it can't be too myopic about it. Talking about impact, I'm curious, what was some of the unexpected things that came from investing in LinkedIn over the years?
Everything. So many things. Quick up came from LinkedIn. Conferences that I speak at every year came from LinkedIn. Partnerships came from LinkedIn. All of my business at Outlever comes from LinkedIn. Network, relationships, friendships, investor, like everything has come from LinkedIn. But I can't say enough about. I owe most of like the good thing. You do the thing, right? Like you do it well at your company, you're known for it, which is great. But if a tree falls in the forest, does anyone hear it? So if you're not talking about what you're doing and showing examples of that and being out there and creating a front-facing brand for yourself, does anyone see that? Which is just the translation of what I had done in my career. I didn't want to be silent about it. And I carried that over to LinkedIn. And then as a result, a lot of people had seen it and were inspired by it, which is awesome. A lot of great things came from that.
Some great advice. At the end of the day, you're not out there talking about the cool things you're doing. People are left to their own devices to shape the perception of who Melissa is or who Brad is.
Yeah. And it can be viewed as like egotistical, maybe, but okay, if you don't care enough about yourself to put yourself out there, who's going to care about you? And why should they?
Those are some positive things. Is there an unexpected negative impact? Or maybe change the question a little bit. Is there anything about LinkedIn that grinds your gears?
Oh, yeah. Sometimes I have to get off of it. Like I'm on it a lot and I learn a lot and it's wonderful and it's educational and I make great connections and I have those translated to real life conversations like this and a great podcast, a lot of great things, but there's definitely a brain drain on it for sure. People that shout very one-off examples as just truth and fact, which kills me. I'm like, okay, what is this? And you just get a lot. You see a lot of people just spewing opinion as fact, which I just don't love. I think LinkedIn should be a place where we share our experiences and we take from those experiences what we want to, and it becomes the book of our inspiration based on what we find valuable. But I don't think people see it that way. That's how I use it now. I have to. Which is okay. That made an impact, right? That made an impact, but you gotta understand what should be impactful. Otherwise, it'll just drive me nuts. It never used to do that before. I think it's just the saturation of the type of content that you see on there and the things that people say, and people turn it political now, and it becomes another news feed. It's like why I don't try to spend less time on Instagram. It's now like bleeding over to LinkedIn, which it's hard. You only have so much mental capacity to deal with things that are a drain on your emotional and mental health. And I think you just have to be careful with how much time you spend on it.
That is a fair point. Maybe as a function of critical mass, when enough people congregate, some of the bad stuff happens. It could be worse. It could be like Twitter.
Yeah, it's also just, I'm always thinking, I'm like, is LinkedIn like working on this at all? You don't really see a lot of like great changes to the algorithm in a meaningful way. I know they probably are tweaking it behind.
I know they changes now. I don't know if you noticed in the last couple of weeks, if you scroll, you see a lot of people. Who are these people? Like, or sometimes it's interesting.
I see suggested a lot. I'm seeing certain things. I'm just not seeing what I want to see, which is let's do away with some of this crap content that is just like not good for the platform. And it's just regurgitation of the things that are going viral, and the things you see most in your feed, sans your immediate network, are things that are just copy and pasted from other LinkedIn posts. And I feel like I wish we just saw less of that. So I don't know. I spend a lot of my time there, and sometimes I wish it was a little bit better. But
well, I gotta think there are product managers listening out there. A podcast with the name LinkedIn in it, someone might tune in.
It's in their best interest to make the feed as valuable as they can. They have a huge opportunity here. They have every ICP and SME joining the platform to talk about the things they do in great detail. Like what an opportunity. Like not only have they've become one of the biggest professional social network, or the biggest professional social network, and how do you maintain that and make it better every day? Sure, they're trying. I don't want to, I don't
Yeah.
discredit their effort there.
I think there is a little bit of shaping that you can do. I think some of it happens organically from liking and commenting people's stuff. I think if you really like somebody's stuff, you follow them, you ring their bell, and the stuff starts showing up all the time. But they're always tweaking it in some little way. People are complaining about their impressions going down and engagement.
Yeah, I think keep writing about true experiences, keep writing about things that resonate with other people. Yeah, that was always like literally the thing I learned at BuzzFeed that has carried me through my entire career. And I'm not about to stop at that. It worked. It's called being human.
I love that. You probably get a lot of people who see you're at conferences or networking with people at events and whatnot. You meet young founders or even people early in their career who see what you're doing on LinkedIn. They're inspired. And when they ask about LinkedIn, what sort of advice do you give them?
I ask them write down what makes them unique. What are their unique experiences? You have to start somewhere, and you have a story that isn't like everyone else's story. So what is your story, and start to write the chapters of that story in the style of small posts and evolve that over time. And my strategy is write a headline down, write a thought down, and then evolve that thought over time. And sometimes those thoughts take months or they don't come out at all. And it doesn't matter. It's just get things onto a page and start thinking about that. And the other piece is be human. What would people want to learn from you? How can you help shape the community? How can you help advise others and be and contribute back to the greater good of what LinkedIn could be in a perfect world, right? And then that's the advice I give. And I think let it come naturally. Don't force it. If you have to force it, put it aside and go back to it after some time.
Speaking about contributing to the greater good, who do you think is doing LinkedIn right these days? And who are you following and learning from?
Alina, who's the CEO of Chili Piper, I think she's great. She's so vulnerable and real about her journey and writing on LinkedIn and being a CEO and trusting herself. And yeah, I like how human she is. She's just like such a real person and is vulnerable. I love people that are vulnerable because vulnerability is just like the truest look at someone. Devin Reed is really great. He's a good friend of mine, and his interviews with B2B SaaS folks are awesome. They're just like really, he's one of the best interviewers I've ever seen. And I love watching his videos. They're very like LinkedIn native, but he does them really well. They look great. They sound great. And he's interviewing really smart people. I could go on and on. There's so many great people on there doing real things. But the most important thing is that you feel like you're listening to a real person with a unique perspective who's authentically themselves. And that's why I follow people. And that's why I like, reading what they have to say.
All right, we're rounding the corner to the end of the episode. Is there anything going on at Outlever that you'd like to share with the audience?
A lot. Obviously, LinkedIn has been a really valuable tool for Outlever. Our growth has been 100% founder-led to this point. Like people following me on LinkedIn that have followed me my entire career that are now like, wow, I found this really interesting. You're solving a lot of the things that I'm struggling with on the brand building, content, thought leadership side. It's really interesting. So a lot of it's come from that. And Outlever is a really new way of thinking that is the kind of the culmination of my entire career and everything I've learned and have been frustrated with and wanted to solve for. Yeah, I think big things are happening at Outlever and things are going really well. And I think it's really exciting to be on my own. I'm learning a lot every day. And trying to write as much as I can about that. And yeah, think about how I should write about it and how I shouldn't write about it. And yeah, it's a journey. It's a journey. Starting something yourself is definitely challenging, but it's very rewarding too.
I'm watching that space and I will continue to be rooting for you here on the sidelines.
Thank you.
Everybody go follow Melissa on LinkedIn and maybe follow her on Instagram as well. Is there anywhere else where people should follow you?
Mostly LinkedIn. You can find my entire life on LinkedIn. That's where I live.
All right, Melissa, thank you so much for being generous with your time and insights. And until next time, let's stay connected.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode, follow Brad and Spectimer on LinkedIn for hot takes and tactical executive branding advice. For the readers in the audience, subscribe to LinkedIn Famous on Substack. And if you really loved this episode, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or the podcasting platform of your choice. Until next time, stay bold, authentic, and keep on creating.